It is so important for you now more than ever to be able to really create space around what's happening externally, what's happening around the world, and what you're feeling inside. There's this old aspect of you that wants to tie everything back to some sort of a trauma that you've had in your life. And if you look out into the world from that perspective, you're going to certainly see validation for all of your limitations, all of your limiting beliefs, all of your traumas, all of the things that made you feel like a victim. There's plenty of that happening right now around the world. People are fighting, people are arguing. There's all sorts of crazy things happening. Now, it is important to remember that as we transition to a higher frequency reality, a higher frequency timeline, because we're in this time-space reality, we need to go through these events. We need to go through continuous continuity of events. I know a lot of people out there have just said you could basically snap your fingers and you could be in New Earth. Well, you could certainly do that and align and center and feel the New Earth frequencies. But being that we're here with others, we're co-creating this reality, and there is a collective consciousness and there's a clearing of dense energy, we are still immersed in the process. And that process is a moment by moment by moment by moment process. And we need to go through these experiencing of things shifting really before we could actually start to manifest this new earth experience. But it all starts within, and it all starts within you in your heart space and getting anchored deep into the body and bringing higher aspects of consciousness in so that we can allow the old energy that's been hidden for so long to kind of come up, to be seen, to be experienced, to be felt. That's part of that continuity process that I'm talking about. And sometimes that process looks chaotic, okay? It looks really, really strange. It could look very opposite of what you would expect where we're headed to look like, New Earth to look like, right? But these are the repressed, the hidden shadows that are coming up to be revealed, and we're seeing it happen all throughout the country. We're seeing it happen all throughout the world. This is simply a transmutation of dense energy. It is bringing darkness into the light. All of the control mechanisms, all of the things that were designed and set up to strip you and disempower you are all falling apart. This is an opportunity for you to become empowered and take your power back. Now, by that, I don't mean diving into a specific cause and feeling empowered. There's a lot of false light out there regarding that right now. You see, that's keeping you anchored into a lower polarizing timeline. Okay, when I talk about becoming empowered, it's really separating yourself or pulling back your energy from feeding these old, dense timelines. The timelines that keep you in fear, the timelines that want to keep you in control. And there's a lot of noise out there that's trying to keep you in fear. Okay, so it's important for you to realize that these are just old timelines that are really, it's like their last hurrah. They're trying to get your attention using fear. And by using fear, if you subscribe to that and you make a choice, whether it be conscious or unconscious, what you're doing is you're empowering those realities. And the more you empower those realities, the more those realities stick around in your experience. Now, the more you can get anchored in your body, the more higher frequency timelines start to become available, and you start to perceive what's happening in the world from a completely different perspective, from a more whole, more aligned, more healed perspective. And you know that all of these little off-ramps to these fear-based timelines are there to remind you to stay anchored and centered and remain on the expressway in the fast lane to New Earth, to a higher frequency reality. They're all distractions, but we look at these distractions and we see them as opportunities to, again, become that observer, become present, create more space, and do that inner healing work. Meaning, when the ego comes up and says, oh, there's fear, something's happening out there, I need to dive into that timeline and I need to support it in one way or another because I'm scared, that's an old aspect of you that's coming up. That's an invitation to kind of get off the off ramp, off the express highway to New Earth, and go entertain that timeline and live in that experience. Very important now to remain centered and observe. I got a message the other night from my Pleiadian guide reinforcing or validating that very concept. That's why I'm bringing it to you today. She told me it is so important to be the anchor of light, the anchor of love, the anchor of stability in these chaotic times as this dense energy rises up to be alchemized. And that means seeing everything that's happening in your reality from that 30,000 foot view, like the top of the mountain. You're up there, you're looking down, and you're realizing that all of these old timelines are playing themselves out. And the reason it's so noisy is because that energy is fighting for its survival. But because of you, because of the light workers, the star seeds, those on the ascension path, the energy to sustain those old timelines just isn't there. They're no longer supported. So they're kind of out there dying, right? Kind of like the ego death, like the old aspects of you. When you no longer feed them energy, they essentially, what feels like they die off, right? They're not as noisy, they're not as loud in your experience. Well, that's what's happening now around the planet, is all of these fear-mongering timelines are dying off. They're up, they're flailing around, but they no longer have the energy to support them. Sure, there are people out there that really want to live in that timeline and really give their power to that timeline, but the more people that remain anchored, remain centered, and detached from all of that noise, the less energy is given to those timelines. So you're going to get to see them flail around and die off as you remain on that frequency New Earth express highway to higher frequencies. So right now, it is not important to entertain these old timelines and dive in and pick your cause and fight for it, right? Because that's polarity, that's division. And we don't want that. We're moving to a unity timeline where we're all operating from a higher frequency perspective. So what it's important for you to do right now is to observe when these old aspects of you come up and want to get off that off-ramp, that freeway off-ramp, and dive into one of these dying timelines. Don't allow that to happen. Sure, you're going to feel it, but remain anchored and centered in your body. Remain connected to your heart so that you can observe it all from that 30,000 foot view, just like my Pleiadian guide said. There is no right, there's no wrong, there just is. And whether you perceive something as right or wrong is based on where you sit on that frequency ladder, right? The more engaged you are, the more out of alignment you are. You've taken the off-ramp and you're agreeing to stay stuck on a lower frequency timeline. And again, that brings up fear, that brings up anger, and all of these dense emotions, right? And if you align with that, you're going to hang there and you're feeding these old timelines. So allow yourself to be the observer. Allow yourself to remain focused on where we're headed, humanity, right? As a collective. We're alchemizing the density. How do you alchemize the dense energy? Well, it's got to rise up out of the shadows. It's got to go from being hidden to being seen. That's what's happening right now. It plays out in very chaotic ways, right? How it manifests, it's just how this energy plays out. And you're going to have an opinion or judge how things are unfolding, okay? And again, that's your ego trying to pull you in to these lower frequency polarizing timelines. They are dying. They cannot be sustained where we're headed. So you need to be on that highway. I know sometimes it looks like there's a thick fog ahead. Turn your headlights up, metaphorically speaking, right? As bright as you can so that you can peer through that fog and just keep heading down that highway towards New Earth. Stay in that express lane because you're going to be passing by all of these billboards labeled with fear, right? We've got World War III, we've got dictatorship, we've got, new COVID, all of these things. They're simply billboards on that highway at the exits inviting you off. to stay in a lower frequency reality. That is not where we're headed. See it for what it is. They're old structures that are trying to maintain control over you, because if they can control you, they stay relevant. They are no longer relevant. Stay centered, stay aligned, look straight ahead. And when that old you pops up and says, hey, let's get off here because I'm really feeling scared, you could say, no, 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 no. We've got this. We are love, and we're headed towards new earth.